Jai Shri Ram, we have Jai Bansal ji. He is the VP of Vishwendu Parishad Education. And this is our third episode. The previous episode we have done, one was the quest for civilization identity. And another one was revisiting our civilization. He has a depth knowledge and he has written the books, and even Modi ji has recommended his book. He has visited New Delhi with his books. So I would highly recommend, if you can buy his book and go through it, you will get much more knowledge about the Hinduism. By the way, when he started his career, he was in the young age, he was not that much into the Hinduism or any kind of that stuff. There was no religion. Kind of an atheist is the personality he had. And then slowly in the foreign land, you always get questions that what is your religion, what you do in your religion. And from there, he got little bit of inspiring about the Hinduism, and he started learning. And I could say he's a scholar in Hinduism. That's it. No more than that. And welcome, sir. And what are the topics that we are going to discuss today, sir?
Yes, so Manan bhai, first of all, namaskar to you, and namaskar to your audience. And thank you for the kind introduction. As you pointed out, my background is a scientist. I was not into, our civilizational knowledge, civilizational history, or about Hindu Dharma. But when I came here at the young age of 21, all kinds of questions were being asked about, where I came from, what I believed in, what my forefathers did, and what Bharat or people from Bharat actually, what were their accomplishments. And frankly, I did not know much. At that young age, you're more worried about your career, about your education, and so on and so forth. But slowly, that inspired me to understand who I was, where I came from, what my background was, what culture and civilization I belong to, and so on and so forth. So that is something that I have spent a lot of time trying to understand and learn, and now I'm trying to, of course, spread what little I know. I don't know everything, but I think I know a little bit more than I used to. So I'm trying to share what I know with as many people as I can. So today's topic is actually very topical. It's I've chosen to talk about the caste system today, and as many Hindu Americans would know, um, caste is being weaponized against Hindus in the West for some time. We will talk a little bit about that, but I thought let's talk about the caste system, what it's about, where it came from, whether it really belongs, as part of Hindu Dharma, or is something that somehow got pushed on us. So with that, just allow me to share my so I have a few slides, so I'm going to share these slides. So as you can see, I've called the topic today caste system, the bane of our existence. It's because I called it bane of our existence because it has it's been weaponized against us, and it's been made, they're trying to make life difficult for us. So more people know about the reality of the caste system, more people are going to be able to answer questions about it and fight the narrative that's going on against Hindus in the West. Okay, so with that, let me just go straight into the topic. So, what is the context? Um, I think we know that caste is a major fault line for the Indian society. I mean, we cannot walk away from the fact that there is some classification that exists in Indian society. Not here, but we're talking about in the traditional Indian society that many of us grew up in. Okay, um, so it exists. We should not deny the fact that it does. And there is some traditional classification into these four categories that we'll come to in a second. But it's become a fodder for this very negative narrative about Hindu Dharma. If you come to, talk to any Westerner, or you pick up a school book of your children, or even in college, uh, the caste is the first thing they tell you about Hindu Dharma. Hindu Dharma has a caste system. It has these four categories, and their vertical Shudras are in the worst state of affairs, and etc. etc. So it's become a part of the toxic narrative about Hindu Dharma in the West, particularly. And in modern times, it's being weaponized against us. There are various legislations that people have tried. At city level, they have succeeded. At the state level, they have not succeeded, at least in one case. That we will briefly touch on towards the end of our conversation. But we have to be watchful of these movements, because you never know, someone may succeed one day. So Hindus need to know about what's going on and how to fight it. Now, there are some popular myths about the caste system that are prevalent in the West. They are pushed through in school books. The media talks about them. If you go to internet, the things like Wikipedia, you'll come across these myths all over the place. The first myth is that the caste is a fundamental part of Hindu Dharma. It comes from our shastras. It's not just something that people dreamed of. It is actually prescribed as part of Hindu Dharma. So if you want to kill caste, you really have to get rid of Hindu Dharma. I mean, I think that is what is implied. The second thing is that caste system dictates our choices in life. Who you're going to marry, what job you're going to get, what kind of education you're going to get, where you're going to live. Even all those myths are promoted by the media. And the other thing they talk about is that it defines from birth who the winners are going to be, who are going to get the good jobs, who are going to get make more money, who are going to be in a position of power, versus people who are going to be losers. In other words, it's all defined by birth, by your caste. That's a myth that is out there. Now, third myth that is starting to be promoted in recent times is that caste system is widely practiced among the Hindus in America and in the West in general. In other words, the caste system that exists, or the system that exists in Bharat, when Hindus come here in the West, they bring those attitudes with them and they practice them here. And there is caste discrimination that takes place in the job place wherever they are in position of power. They practice discrimination on the basis of caste. So these are some of the myths that are out there, and I feel that we need to talk about these myths and see if we can see through them, and if we can actually negate and shatter these myths. It is very important for Hindu society here, in order for us to survive and thrive. We need to be able to break through these myths. Okay, so first thing is, everyone talks about caste system, but I think it is important for us to understand the real terminology. Uh, Caste system is not, frankly, ours. If you go to some village in Bharat, they don't know what caste is. Okay, caste comes to us through English language. We have a different terminology, and those terminologies are Varna system and Jati system. So, uh, caste is only a word that is spoken when we are speaking English. Okay, only English speaking people, when they talk to each other, they might ask you, what is your caste? But reality is, traditional Hindus, they typically would ask not even Varna, they would ask what jati you're from, in the villages. So let's understand what these Varna and Jati actually are and what they are meant to be. So Varna is meant to be an aptitude based mapping of professions. Now, what that means, uh, if you are someone who is interested in accumulating knowledge, you want to study math, you want to study sciences, you want to study some philosophy, you want to be an economist, you want to be whatever, you in other words, your aptitude is towards learning and teaching, then that is a certain varna. That varna is called Brahman. Okay. um, in the West, you might call them intellectuals.
Yeah,
Okay, but there is no difference. This is people who want to learn, who have an aptitude for learning and teaching. Then there is a second class of people who are actually, who have body strength, who have a, you know they want to protect. Okay, so there are a lot of families in the West that are, like traditionally they are soldiers. Mm, and they take pride in the fact that many generations have served in the army, or served in the air force, or served in navy, or whatever, or marine, and so on and so forth. So these are people who are protectors of the society, and we call them Kshatriya. Our Shastras call them Kshatriya. Then there's a whole class of people who are more into running the society on a day-to-day basis. Running a business, maybe farming, maybe some, you have some crafts, and you're maybe a jeweler, or maybe ironsmithy, you are a lohar or whatever have you. So you are the backbone of the society. The largest section of the society are people who are running the society on a daily basis. They're creating products, they're selling products, they're buying products, they are doing all sorts of things like that. Now, those are called Vaishyas in our society. In this society, you might call them the entrepreneurs, or you might call them, I don't know, business people. You might, they go by many different names. It's not as if they don't exist in the Western society. They do. It's
yeah,
just
yeah, they do.
names are different. But in our system, they're called Vaishyas.
Yep.
The final one is, and that's also a very large class, and in fact, many of us belong in that class now. We work for others. Okay, we offer our services. We might have some skills, or we might not have skills. Some people just are doing a laborer's job. Others are doing, they might have some skills that they know how to build houses, they know how to keep things clean, or whatever have you. These are people who work for others for a living. They are, so they're serving the society, and they're called shudras in our system. Now, each one of them is important. Okay,
Yeah,
none of, you cannot say that one person is more important than the other. The the money you would make, or the power that you might have, depends on the kind of work you're doing for the society. Obviously, you cannot pay the same salary to, let's say, a plumber that you would pay to a doctor. Okay, so
yeah,
it depends on what you're doing for the society. That will determine your well-being, your wealth, and your so on and so forth, and power. But those are the four categories. Now, then you have the jati system. Now, jati system is how you relate to other people in the society. So Varna is all about yourself. I am someone who is interested in learning. So I have this Brahmana Lakshana, but Jati is a group thing. How you relate to other people in the society. So you might be related to other people through blood, you might be related to other people through profession. So for example, all the jewelers, they might, they develop skills, and they relate to each other because they're in the same profession. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, these days we have guilds or unions. We might so they have we have jatis even today in the Western society. They just called different things. Or you may be related through, you have a common language, common terminology. Or you might have regional affinities. For example, you're from Gujarat, and within
Yeah.
Gujarat there are many communities. Some are in farming, others are in diamond business, some are in various other things. So they are related to each other because they come from the same region, or they are working in the same profession. Okay, so that's what we call by jati, and it's determined by birth. Because if you're born in a jeweler family, you're a jeweler. Now you may choose, if you choose to do a different profession, then of course that'll become your jati. But when you're born, or born in let's say farmer family, you have a farm, and you're a farmer by jati. Okay, so those are the terminologies that we have in the Hindu social order. Then there is this business of caste and race. These are not our terms, these are Western terms. They are, in fact, tools of social discrimination. And I'll explain in a second. They are definitely not related to the Hindu Varna Jati system. And unfortunately, they confuse the two for a good reason. They, meaning the Western colonizers, confused it, and we got confused in the process. Now today, if you talk to someone who is, you're talking to him in English or her in English, you would ask, what is your caste? Because you're speaking in English, you don't think of asking what your jati is. So that's the way things are. But we've confused ourselves between these terms. But we need to keep them separate. Next, so let's talk about where this Varna Jati system. Where is it mentioned? Is it really part of Hindu Dharma, or is it something that is more of a social practice? Okay, so Rigved, actually, Rigved is the oldest book known to mankind, humankind. It metaphorically connects these four varna that I talked about, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, to the creator's body parts. So there is a sukta in Rigved called Purusha Sukta, and there it says Brahman came from the mouth, and and Kshatriya came from the chest or the upper body, and and then Vaishya from the below that, and then Shudra came from the feet. Now, it's just a way of metaphorically describing things. It doesn't mean that feet are less important than the mouth or the stomach or the chest. It's just a way of
Yeah.
describing. That's all. Then we have Mad Bhagavad Gita. It relates Varna to a person's inherent abilities and tendencies also. And then there are some Dharma Shastras that have some references to endogamy. Now, what is endogamy? Endogamy is it means you marry within a certain group of within your own group. Okay, that's so. There are some shastras that talk about marriage within a particular group of people, and it made sense in the traditional society because you have within a group of people you have certain traditions that you follow, certain language, certain food habits. So it made sense to marry within that group. But then there is Manusamriti. Manusmriti is different from, at least Manusmriti as we have come across now, as we know it today, is an exception to our dharmashastras. It actually lays down specific rules for governing, about marriage, about inheritance, about social functions, about how to run societies and so on and so forth. And it actually prescribes punishments, if you do not obey these rules. So that is Manusmriti is the one where you start to see this classification, that we deride today, that we castigate today, starting to come up. But what is Manusmriti? Where did it come from? Manusmriti is of course a part of Dharmashastra, and it is one of the most quoted source in the West about the oppressive social laws that Hindu society is supposed to have. Now, the fact of the matter is, there are more than 50 different versions of Manusmriti that are available out there. You can just go on Wikipedia and look for Manusmriti, and it will tell you right off the bat that there is not one version. There are many different versions. So when the Europeans first came across Hindu society, when British East India Company came to Bharat, and they were starting to rule us. They wanted to understand us, and they looked for these things, and they said, yeah, oh, there's so many different versions, which one should we pick? So then some scholars decided that something called a Calcutta version of Manusmriti is more authentic than everything else. So they all latched on to this one. And this fellow William Jones, he's the one who found Sanskrit, who learned Sanskrit in 1770s, and he was the first one to translate this Calcutta version of Manusmriti into English. So this is how the Western world, for the first time, came to know about what Manusmriti is. And the problem with the Manusmriti is that the ones that we have out there, uh, they don't agree with each other. It's we don't know which one was first, which one is second, which one, why people changed it, who changed it. We have no idea. So how can you possibly use that as the basis for anything? But that's the one that's being used in the West. And if you look at what we consider an authentic today, the Calcutta version, even there, in one place, it talks about strict laws for women. In another place, it says women are to be worshipped. So, there are a lot of inconsistencies, which tells you that we don't know what the real Manusmriti was. But East India Company, because they were trying to define, trying to formulate laws for Hindu society, formulate laws for the Muslim society, and so on and so forth, they decided to use this Manusmriti as the basis for developing the legal system for Hindus, the Hindu law code. So that's where we are stuck. Now, there is a ground reality. Ground reality is different. It's in 1871, this fellow, C.F. Magrath, he was the author of Bihar census. So 1871 is when they were trying to, for the first time, introduce the caste system in India. There was census that was taking place, but this fellow, he says, the now meaningless division into four castes. He used the word caste, but he really means varna. But he said that now the meaningless division into four castes, alleged to have been made by Manu, should be put aside because it just doesn't apply. It's not being used in the society. Then we have this fellow Nelson. Apparently, in 1887, there was a legal case in the Madras High Court, And this is the statement that he made. He says there are various contradictions and inconsistencies in Manusmriti itself, and that these contradictions would lead one to conclude that such a commentary did not lay down legal principles to be followed, but were merely recommendations in nature. So there, some guidelines were put for the kings and for the rulers, and it is up to the ruler what part they actually put in practice, which part they don't. You know, there are a lot of scholars write lot of books and say, you should be doing that, you should be doing that, and the people who are ruling the society, they choose what part to take, what part not to take. Okay, moving on. We have in modern times we have this professor at Cambridge. She's now retired, so she's in emerita. Her name is Susan Bailey. She says, well into the colonial period, the formal distinction of castes were only of limited importance. you know you would not know that, if you look at India today. There is certainly divisions that are practiced in the society, but she's saying well into the colonial period, these caste systems were not all that important. Then you have another historian, this David Buxbaum. He wrote a paper in 1998. He says Manusmriti does not, as a whole, represent a set of rules ever actually administered in Hindustan. Okay, these papers are available. People can read them for themselves. Donald Davis, in as late as 2010, he says no historical evidence for either an active propagation or implementation of Manusmriti by a ruler or any state. So the book exists. Okay, people write all kinds of books. You know,
Mm.
uh, Hitler wrote a book. Okay, but how many societies are using that book to rule societies? Writing a book doesn't mean society has to take those things on. So now that is the reality of the Varna Jati system and of Manusmriti that we had. Now let's look at this business of caste. So caste is a European term. Actually, the original term is casta. It is a Spanish slash Portuguese term from the 14th century of racially profiling people and using it as a tool for the Christian society to discriminate against the Jews who had converted. See, there was a lot of pressure on the Jewish people in around this time to convert to Christianity, and a lot of them did convert under pressure. But you see, they were very progressive Jews, and even when they became Christian, they were they were in very good positions, and they had positions of power, but Christian society did not want to share power with them. So they figured out a way, and this is the way. This is the casta system is what they created to discriminate against the converted people. Okay, so this was being practiced in the Spanish, Portuguese, territories, which were the strongest territories back then, as early as 14th century. Now, when they discovered America, when Columbus discovered America, and the Spanish people started coming here, and then other Europeans started coming here, they implemented this Sistema de Casta in the Spanish American colonies. And this is not something that we are making up. There are books upon books that exist there. These were brutally enforced laws. They created special classes for people who did not have any Spanish blood. In fact, they defined different classes based on the level of Spanish blood that existed in someone. So if a Spanish person married a non-Spanish person, their children would have 50% blood, Spanish blood, and then they marry some non-Spanish. Their children would have only 25% blood, and so on and so forth. So they created all these classes. There were charts, these big charts, where they would show, you know, what caste you belong to, and then that determined the choice of your profession, the taxation level that you would pay, and your legal rights, and even how you dressed. Okay, so this is not something that is hidden from anyone. This actually exists in the Western society. There are books that you can read, and I can give a list, list of names of books that people can go and find out for themselves. Now let's come to the Indian context. So we established that casta is a Spanish and Portuguese term. And Portuguese came, of course, to Bharat, to the west coast of Bharat, Goa, and in late 15th century, 1498, and they were starting to, they rule there and push forth some of the traditions in that area. But now we have British people. They are ruling essentially all of India by this time, and they need to rule the society. So they developed different strategies to rule the society. The first strategy was to destroy the civilizational identity of the people, of our society. I call it ethnocide. So you're basically, killing the ethnicity of people, ethnical identity of the people.
Yep.
The, the second strategy they had was what is popularly known as divide and rule. And what that meant is you find the fault lines, or you create new fault lines in the society, and you propagate those fault lines by rewarding certain group of people, by pushing down, punishing by a certain group of people, by discriminating against certain kind of people, and then you create competition between them. And over time, those societies, those groups, sort of, they start disliking each other, and they were masters at this game, as we all know. Here's this statement by George Orwell, famous journalist. He says, "To destroy a people, obliterate their understanding of their history." So that's what they were trying to do. Now, how are these strategies being pursued? First thing is introduction of the English language. We talked in the last time we were in this conversation. We talked about the introduction of English education in 1835,
Yeah.
which then created this elite class of people who spoke English. Then they started hating their own roots. The way they dress, the way they talk, the way they relate to other people, the food they ate, and how they behaved in society. They started hating their own way of, their traditional way, and started liking the English way. Now, the second thing British did was to create, give names to different different groups of people. So, for example, they said, "Oh, Sikhs are a martial race. The Rajputs are a martial race." Well, if you look at the modern day, military in India, there are people from all over all over the society. People from the south, people from the north, people from the east, west, everywhere. They're all great fighters. So, there's nothing special about the Sikhs or the Rajputs, but by giving them this title, these are the martial races, you made them feel that they have something superior to others, and others feel inferior. And they did that with a number of other categories as well. So you started creating this division in the society. Then last time also we talked about this Aryan invasion theory, where Max Miller said, well, the 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 local inhabitants were these Dravidian people, and these highly advanced people called the Aryans. They came from Europe, and they fought them and they defeated them. They pushed them to the south, and they brought all the wonderful civilizational literature with them, the Vedas and so on and so forth. So what that did was that created the north-south divide in India. The, you know, uh, the so people in the south, even today, many of them think they are the Dravidians, and these Aryans in the north, they were not our friends. Uh, the other thing is, of course, it destroyed our pride and our civilizational achievement, because everything, all good things came from Europe. So what is there to be proud of? And of course, it's also legitimized, the British occupation of our country, because, you know, the Aryan invasion theory said, well, people have been coming all the time, bringing, new knowledge and civilization to this country. So this is our time. This is our turn. Big deal. Okay, so, it did all these things, slowly started destroying the structure of our society, creating divisions. And then something else was going on. You see, you remember British came as traders, East India Company initially, and they had only one job: to rob the country of its material wealth. Okay, they were not interested in promoting Christianity or anything like that. So when Christians started coming to India, when East India Company was ruling the country, East India Company would actually put them back in the ship, and send them back. But then they complained to, in the British Parliament in 1813. The British Parliament postured, passed a, a rule in the British Parliament in 1813, which gave missionaries the right to go to India and start spreading the religion for the moral and religious improvement of Indians. That was the idea. Now the problem is, they tried their best, but they were not having good success because of this very tightly, created jati system. If you're part of, let's say, I don't know, a Gujarati society, in, let's take, yeah, Patel society, for example,
Yeah.
and someone converts to Christianity, all of a sudden the Patel society would not want you part of it. They would not marry you cannot marry within the Patel society. You could not, so these were very tight, societies, and so the Christian missionaries were having very hard time converting because of the jati system. And this is what they said in 1850. There was a conference in Madras. They said, caste is one of the greatest obstacles to the progress of gospel in India. So somehow the jati system had to be destroyed. Varna jati system had to be destroyed. And the other thing, of course, was Brahmins were putting up first, because they were the knowledgeable people. They were, quoting shastras left and right. So the other thing they wanted to destroy was the Brahmins, which they did a very good job of. The second thing that happened, Manan bhai, 1857, we had India's first war of independence, first war for freedom, and it all nearly defeated the British people, and basically nearly kicked out the East India Company out of Bharat. Unfortunately, um it just they managed to fight back, and then British Crown took over the country in 1858, and they said, look, this they cannot afford to have another repeat of this experience. Okay, they lost a lot of material, a lot of people, and they said they cannot afford to do this again. So they put in massive effort to subdivide the masses, people. Okay, so this was very well planned.
So it
To
was a weapon used against us.
Absolutely, because their job was to survive, and their job was to rob the country of its material wealth, and then of course the new job was to create, turn the society into Christian society. So all these tasks cannot be done unless you break the society, unless you break the things that hold the society together, the Varna Jati system. So this social re-engineering started. There are many parts to it, but I'm just focusing on this one part. 1871 is the first time they introduced a new social classification system, which was built on this Spanish Portuguese system, Sistema de Casta. They called it caste. It anglicized the casta to caste, and they created, they tried to figure out what were different groups of people in our society. They had a list. They created an initial list of, I don't know, bunch of people, bunch of what they call caste. And it was very funny. I mean, Brahmins are easy to find. They are people who learn and who teach, so that was easy. um, but then they had all kinds of problems. They have they have a caste called, traders is a caste. There was a caste even called, the cooks was a caste. There was another caste, I think, gardeners was a caste. So they basically, whatever they saw people doing different things and say this must be a caste. But so that's one thing. So they made a list. It's very hilarious, actually, very hilarious. It would be more funny if it was not so destructive. Um, but the other thing they did was they decided that something was at a higher level than the other. So this was rather than having a horizontal system where everyone, you go back and forth, but they said, oh, this caste is higher than this caste is lower than this caste. And when they didn't know, they just forced something, because when you're making a list, in a list, something is going to be, at the top, something is going to be at the bottom, and then things are going in the middle, they're going to be in some order. So that became the levels of, what is your level in the society. I'm I'm Mr. I'm caste so and so, and I'm higher than you, I'm lower than you, and that became a bone of contention. No one wants to be lower than someone else. Everyone wants to be higher than somebody. And they use Manusmriti as a religious justification. Of course, we just went over Manusmriti, what it contained and what it didn't contain, and how confusing it is. But they decided they're going to use that as a justification. Here's this fellow census supervisor. His name is Cornish, W.R. Cornish. He was a census supervisor in Madras Presidency in 1871, same time that this was happening. Uh, and this is his statement. He says, whether there was ever a period in which Hindus were composed of four classes is extremely doubtful. The- See, I have decided that I'm only going to quote the Western people, because, you know, when we quote, our own people, the Western people say, well, they're biased. So, you cannot believe what they say. So I've decided I'm only going to go, have these words coming from their own mouth. So,
Yeah.
so here we have it. Now, more is going on. So they are through the census. That 1871 is when they're taking the census, and so they're pushing in the census. They force that people have to pick what caste they belong to. Okay, so this is for the first time in a government document. You have to identify your caste, and you don't know what caste even means. You only know varna, you only know jati, and you probably not, and what you think you are may not be on their list. So now you have to pick one. It's just like, on a computer form. If your identity or whatever you are is not listed, you end up having to pick one that you think is the closest. So that's what's happening here now. So the problem is, because this list was never complete, the British people were having to create these new castes all the time. So in 1871, I don't know how many castes were there on the list. By 1901, there were 1,641 castes, according to one document. And by the time 1931 census came around, there were more than 4,000. And by this time, British actually realized that this was not working. So in 1931, actually they abandoned it. But I'm just telling you that this was a made up system. They didn't know what the heck they were doing. Well, they knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to divide the society, but caste was just being created on an ongoing basis. If there was no suitable caste for a given person, or they would just look at his profession, that person's profession, or their title. Some people in villages are called, for example, chaudhries. So they would just say, okay, your caste is chaudhry. Okay, so there were all kinds of things. uh, so for example, in Muslims there is Mirza, or there is something like that. They'll just go, oh, your caste is Mirza. Okay, Ev- so it's just very funny. Now the problem was with the tribal people. Tribal people, you just had no idea what was, who they were, where they fitted in this structure. They were displaced people because of the Muslim atrocities. So a lot of these people were displaced from their land, and they were just trying to make a living, off in the forest, or tribal people. So now this fellow Herbert Risley, he created this nasal index, where he would measure the size of your nose so many different ways, and based on some of his calculations, he would decide where you fitted in the social structure. So I think this is important for us to realize that this is all a made up stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It has no basis in reality. They choose Manusmriti to justify it. They create these classes. They create names for castes that have no meaning. And before you know it, you have a caste system in the society. And then people are fighting with each other, saying, I'm higher caste than you are, because no one wants to be lower caste than someone else.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden, you see, you have created a massive confusion and division in the society. A brilliant strategy. Now, so the new classification system was, actually, yeah, based on the nasal index, was first used in 1901. In 1871, they had used their own list, but this more bigger classification system was used in 1901, and people were forced to identify, their caste. And ultimately, in 1931, they said, "Nah, this is not doing anything for us." You see, by this time, they've already divided the society, so they didn't have to spend time and energy and money trying to administer this system. They said, "Fine, we're gonna get done with it." Abandoned it. Here is Middleton in 1921. He was a census superintendent, one of the two. And this is his statement, very important statement. He says, "We pigeonholed everyone by caste. And if we could not find a true caste for them, we labeled them with the name of a hereditary occupation. So you are a Lohar, you are a Sunar, you are a Kumhar, or you are something, Chaudhry, you're Mirza, you're Beg, you're whatever." Uh, And he says, "We deplore the caste system and its effects on social and economic problems, but we are largely responsible for the system we deplore."
yeah,
Okay, people need to frame this statement and put it on their, by their bedside. Uh, it's a very useful statement. Okay, if that was not enough, if that was not enough, British had another problem. You see, in the War of 1857, there were a lot of tribal leaders who fought against the British. They, and of course, they got defeated. So, British wanted to punish these people. And the second thing is, many of these people. Of course, Bhils, etc. They are the tribal people, traditional tribal people. But there are a lot of people who were pushed off their land because of the jizya, tax during the Muslim time, or all the atrocities that Muslim rulers were, imposing on the society. So they could not sustain their land, and they left their ancestral properties and went to jungles. So they were living in the jungles, and they were probably, some of them were probably stealing as well. Some are probably robbing people and all that. I'm not going to say that everything was perfect in the society, but what the British did was they decided that all these people, they cannot be allowed to interact with the normal society. Okay, so they are not they are hereditary criminals. In other words, as soon as a child is born, the only thing that child knows is criminal behavior. Okay, so, and they cannot survive without committing crime. Therefore, they brought an act in 1871 called the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. It was initially, I think, applied to Bengal only, Bengal presidency, and then slowly it was spread all over Bharat. But what it did was it broke them away from the society completely. They could not go outside of their territory. If they did, they would be arrested and sent to jail. They had to go to the nearest police station every week to show that they were still on the on their territory and not outside. Many restrictions on their movement, many restrictions on what they could do and could not do. So 90 years later, or in 80 years later, in 1947, when Bharat ultimately managed to kick the British colonizers out, uh, there were some 13 million people in some 130 plus, communities who could be arrested if they were found outside of their territories. The law was repealed in 1949, but some of the reputation takes long time to go away. So if you're looking for creating a Dalit problem, Dalit society, don't have to look any farther than the Criminal Tribes Act of 1847. Okay, um, so this is another way to put division in the society. It's all part of divide and rule. Okay, so what is the impact in the society? You see, impact is very simple. Caste became the de facto, the default way of how you order the social structure. You say Brahmins at the top, Shudras at the bottom, all these people somewhere in between, all the 4,000, 5,000 jatis, you fit somewhere. That became the social order. And hundreds of thousands of books have been written by the West, and for promoting the idea that Indian society is a caste-based society. And school books today, the first thing you learn is this is how Indian society is structured. But uh, Varna Jati system, which was basically a fluid concept, was now morphed into this very rigid vertical system. And caste became intertwined with Varna and Jati. As I said, if you go to a village who has not learned English yet, they don't know what caste is. The word caste will not come out of their mouth. They will ask what jati you belong to. That's
Yeah.
it. In other words, but caste became totally confused, totally intertwined with Varna Jati system. For those who spoke English, or or people who were in interacting with the urban societies, even a sabji wala, in today, if he would probably ask what your caste is, if he had to ask something, because he thinks English term is cooler than using the, our standard Hindi term jati. So it's a the caste is the problem of the urban English, language society.
Yeah.
It is, it's not a, it's not a problem of the village society, or I mean the rural society. And the second impact it had was it created a huge surge in the Dalit class. There may have been some pre-existing social problems. I'm not going to deny that, but it just made it so much bigger, and they became very easy targets for the missionaries for the conversion. Okay, so now let's come back to the original slide where we started. These are the myths that exist in the Western world. Caste is a fundamental part of Hindu Dharma. You know, uh, if you want to get rid of caste, you have to get rid of Hindu Dharma. Is basically what it means. But let's look at that. We've just shown that caste is actually not part of Hindu Dharma. The Shastras did not speak about caste, or they did, they spoke about the Varna Jati system, which had its own meaning. It is just a classification of the society. It didn't mean what the caste means. So it is not a fundamental part of Hindu Dharma. Now, we have to admit that there is a classification in the Indian society that exists, but it is of a recent vintage. It was something that was pushed on us. And the other thing we have to also think is there is a difference between a societal practice, so, what society might practice, versus what dharma or religion might teach you. Okay. Now I'll give you an example. Uh, I think just about every Christian society has practiced slavery. There's they the all the Europeans, they were involved in the slave trade. Fine, they gave up. That's wonderful. It was outlawed. That's great. But the fact that every Christian society practiced slavery, does that mean slavery is part of Christianity, or it simply means that certain societies practice slavery for a period of time? Okay, same thing applies to the Varna Jati system and the caste system. The fact that today, you know, the so-called caste system or classification system prevails in India, does that really mean that it came from Hindu Dharma, or Hindu Dharma prescribes it?
Nope.
Then you'll have to also say that slavery is prescribed by Christianity. So, I think we have to be consistent when we use these yardsticks. So that's one. So I would say that uh, caste is not a fundamental part of Hindu Dharma. Second thing is dictates. Caste or Varna Jati system dictates life choices. It determines who the winners are going to be and who the losers are going to be. Well, okay, let's take reality. You're born into you're born into a farmer family. Take yourself back 200, 300, 500 years. In a traditional society, there's no society is not very mobile.
Nope.
You're living in a village. You're born in a farming family. What are you going to be doing? What skills are you going to acquire? You're going to be most likely, you've seen farming. You grew up in farming. You're going to farming profession. Okay. If someone born in a Lohar family, in a ironsmith family, well, they see this 24/7. They see their parents making wonderful tools. The craftsmen. They learn the craft and they go. It's a natural tendency for people to do that. And if someone is a teacher, of course, they would send their kids would learn to be, probably would learn to be teachers, because you see, society is not mobile. You're basically doing, you're running your life from wherever you are. very few people, had would go to King's Court or go, go in urban society and get whatever, high-paying jobs, etc. were. So majority of the society. So that, the fact that some of the professions were hereditary professions is not because it's prescribed by the society, by the Varna Jati system. It's simply because that is what's available to you. That's what you learn growing up, and that's what, it's natural that you would practice that, because society is not mobile. It's only a 20th century phenomenon where people are going all over the place, and you can find jobs, factory jobs, or you can find government jobs, you can find whatever. That is not what, society used to be like. We are a rural society. People stayed in their homes, family homes, for generations, and worked their family professions. Now, as far as the business of predetermined winners and losers, I mean, there are classifications in every society. Let's face it. Um, if uh, you're not going to pay um, a let's say a plumber the same salary or same amount as you would pay to, let's say, a government advisor. Okay, or a doctor, or an engineer, or someone like
Yeah,
that. Okay, so it depends on your skill level. It depends on what you have, what your tendency is, what you learned, what you. So when society is not very mobile, a lot of these things sort of fall in place, simply because of where you are, who you are, and so on and so forth. It's not nothing to do with Indian society as such. It is, the same thing with the Western society. I mean, look, where does the word, you have cats like Miller, Butcher, Goldsmith, okay, uh, and what else? You have Plumber. All these are last names today. But guess where they came from? They came from because these families were following those professions. Okay, and they were doing it for generation after generation after generation. So this stratification of the society is not a new thing. It happens everywhere. Um, it's only when society is highly mobile. I mean, these days, your child, you are in Ohio. Your child may get a job in California without any problem, and so there are more job opportunities, more mobility. People tend to find jobs that are not part of their family tradition. But when you are not mobile, that's what you would do. So this business of being, Varna Jati system dictating your life choices is frankly nonsense. It's totally made up. Now, people also quote the idea that you marry within the same, jati and all that. Yeah, that is very true, because these jatis, they were like guilds. They were a group of people who followed a certain profession, or they were related in a certain way. They had a certain way of life. So it is natural for people to find their life partners within their group. Otherwise you have a lot of cultural shock to go through. So these things are actually very natural in traditional societies. So I completely reject this label that Varna Jati system dictated life choices. It is more a function of traditional society versus a modern, urban, mobile society. Now, the last one is an interesting one, and I think this is probably the most important one for us to spend some time on. Excuse me.
no problem, sir. Take your own time.
So, um, you know, this is the most problematic thing that Hindu diaspora faces in the West, particularly in America today. You know, I came from Bharat to North America in late 60s. And I had an engineering degree. I did postgraduate degree here, and then I got a job. Okay, and a lot of people came like me came at that time. When immigration opened up in 1965, and we've been here for about 55, 60 years now. And fact of the matter is that we've done extremely well as a society. We are in high-paying jobs. We are, yes, earning power is very very good. So we are a successful society, but you know what? We have done it on the basis of merit. These people came with, most of us who came to the West came with good education, and we have a very strong family structure. So we don't have to worry about, most of us don't have to worry about, keeping the family together. So we concentrate on raising good children, giving them good education, and concentrating on doing a good job. Okay, and the result is that not we are successful, and our children are successful. Now that creates a problem
Yeah.
because because all of a sudden, here's an immigrant group that is supposed to be, they were our slaves only, some 70, 80 years ago. And how did they become, so successful in such a short period of time? That's problem number one. Problem number two is, in the last 10, 15 years, Hindu society is starting to realize that a lot of uh, bad things have been done to them, even after independence. They a lot of the basic rights that they should have had as Hindus were not actually given to them. Preference was being given to certain minorities. And that realization is starting to dawn on Hindu society today, and they're starting to speak up. They're starting to get a pride in their civilization. People like me are talking about our civilizational history, and there are a lot of people listening to it. So uh, it creates a, all of a sudden, the societies that we're living in, we're a very small minority here. uh, Societies that we're living in, they're saying, oh, these people, how come they are speaking back to us and telling us, all the bad things that we have done. So those two things have created a strong opposition, and created, some societies, some groups who want to actually, interfere with our success. Okay, so how do you do that? How do you stop us from succeeding when we are hardworking, when we put so much effort into education, when our families are, strong families, we're not breaking up that easily? Well, you bring up something that may exist in the traditional society, and you put the label on us. You say, oh, these people, they practice caste in India, and when they come to the West, they bring those attitudes here, and they start practicing, using those attitudes even here. So caste is a big problem in the West. Okay, so
Mm.
so there are a bunch of people who, are promoting that conversation, and this is only happening in the last few years. And so I'll give you some quotes. So the first quote is, Hindu nationalists want to kill 200 million Muslims. This is Ilhan Omar. Uh, Sundar Rajan is she's the founder of a group called Equality Labs. She says Holi celebrates burning of a Bahujan slave. Uh, Aisha Wahab, she is the senator from California. She's the one who pushed this legislation called SB 403 in California, which ultimately got, well, vetoed by the Governor Newsom of California. She says caste discrimination is pervasive and urgent in the West. Uh, then you have New York Times saying concentration camps in for Muslims in Bengal. Okay, those are all kinds of statements. Then there is uh, you know a there is an agency called USCIRF. I think it stands for United States Council for International something or Religious Freedom. Anyway, it's a quasi state agency. It says religious freedom in India is like Iran and North Korea, and so on and so forth. And then the media basically says, hey, listen, Hindus cannot be allowed to speak for Hindus because they're always biased. So we are going to speak for them. Now, so the idea is that caste is something that is inherent in the Hindu Dharma. It is practiced widely in the society, and it's being brought into the West, and it's becoming a big problem here. That's the message that's being conveyed. Now, what does that do? All of a sudden, if you can create legislations, whether at the city level, with the state level, and God forbid, if it happened at the national level, you see, all of a sudden, people can accuse you. If you're in a position of power, they can say, well, this person discriminated me against me on the basis of caste. And suddenly, there'll be a case against you. You may be demoted. You may be, let go. An employer will may decide that it's too much trouble to hire Hindus because they practice caste system, so we're going to hire people who don't have that problem. Universities may use that to discriminate against Hindu children. So all sorts of all of a sudden it creates a problem for us. And what is more interesting is this is being pushed in California first, because California and Washington first. Why? Because that is where the IT industry is. That is where majority of Hindus work. We dominate is not the right word, but we certainly have a huge presence in the IT industry. So if we're going to push this agenda somewhere, California and Washington are the best places to push it, and that's exactly what they have been doing. Now, uh, in 2018, this group called Equality Lab that I just mentioned, they conducted a survey, and in the survey, it was a survey that they conducted without really, there was no, it's not a scientific survey. They cooked it up. We've written a great deal about it, but nevertheless, they concluded that there is a broad-based caste discrimination going on in America. And this woman Sundarajan, the founder, is very very, she's very articulate. You have to give her that. She knows how to get attention, so she's been able to convince a lot of employers and a lot of universities that caste is a big problem. And you see, we already have huge amount of liberal agenda going on in universities these days. All sorts of woke culture sort of germinating in universities and taking root in corporate culture and so on and so forth. So she was able to push this narrative in the corporate world, particularly in the IT industry and in certain universities. And all of a sudden, you started seeing caste being, defined as a category, protected category or discriminatory category in various institutions. Apple did it. I think the entire California university system, state university system, did it. And there's the famous case in Cisco, where two of the managers were accused by someone who claimed to be a lower caste, and he said they discriminated against him in giving a promotion in terms of promotional opportunities, etc. And that case has been used to to sort of create emotions in people and bring in this SB 403 legislation in California. Now it turns out the Cisco case was found to be actually totally bogus. In fact, in every situation where caste discrimination has been raised as a legal case, it has been thrown out of court. Um, However, these groups are highly determined. SB 403 actually sailed through the legislation, both houses. First through the Senate with very high majority, then through the other chamber also with very high majority. It was only vetoed by the governor of the state, Governor
Yeah.
Newsom. So so yes, we were able to avoid the situation, but every time, this will come up in many other places. So my only point to all Hindu community in the West is you have to be vigilant, you have to learn what the reality is, and you have to fight like one people, because if you don't, you will suffer. And if you don't suffer, it's almost guaranteed that your children will suffer in terms of educational opportunities, in terms of job opportunities, in terms of social acceptance, and all sorts of things. So be aware, be knowledgeable, and be aware is my message. So I would say that actually this business of being widely practiced among the Hindu American society is false. It's a made up story, but nevertheless, it's a story that these people are determined to push.
Yeah.
Now, I think the other thing I would ask is, when was the last time you know you or I or any one of us ever talked to our children about caste? In fact, I have three grown-up children, and I can guarantee you they don't even know what caste means, and they certainly have no idea what their caste is.
Yep.
Uh, and I'm sure this is the case with pretty much every family, every Hindu family in this country, because we do not bring those attitudes here. We are immigrant society. We came here for financial well-being, for settling here, for being part of the society, for being a contributing part of the society, and we're doing all that. And none of us came here to practice social divisions. It just doesn't work here. It just doesn't work here. So I would again urge our viewers to be engaged in this conversation about caste. Learn enough about what caste, where caste came from, through talks like this one. Read about it, be knowledgeable so that you can fight back. That's Knowledge is power. Knowledge is the only way you're going to fight back. And the second way is be united and support your institutions, support your organizations. So that, man bhai, is what I wanted to share with our viewers today. I hope it has been educational, and I certainly would be happy to hear back from our viewers as to whether these conversations are helpful, so that we can bring more of these conversations to this platform in future.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, viewers and listeners with us. And today's topic was on the casteism. So, those who don't know, there is a big conspiracy going on in USA regarding the SB 403. If you need to more on the details, the number will be given there from Jai Bansal. You can contact him directly, or you can email him directly and talk to him and get some more educational things from him. If you are facing any kind of this kind of stuff and you want to get some advice, we highly recommend that you refer to the SB 403, right, sir?
Yeah, so SB 403 was the Senate Bill 403 in California. Now that bill has been defeated because the governor has vetoed it. So that is no more. But I think people need to know the history of it and what it took us to defeat that bill, so that you know
In
I'm
future,
I'm 100% certain in my mind that it will pop up someplace else.
yeah,
Whether it pops up tomorrow, day after, or a year from now, I don't know, but it is going to pop up somewhere. We, as Hindu society, need to know about what the history is and how to fight back.
basically, Britishers used this as a weapon against us, and now we are suffering with it.
Yeah, well, they used it for their own reasons to break up our society, and now so they pushed it on us there, and now they are weaponizing it against us to stop our progress in this society. So this is double jeopardy. But I think we are smart people, we are educated people, and all we need is to be together in this thing and fight it like one people, and we can defeat it.
Yes. So, listeners and viewers, this was the third episode. We are going to come with the series of episodes. Till then, Jai Shri Ram, Namaskar.
Jai Shri Ram. Namaskar. Dhanyawad.
Dhanyavad.